Well, new here at noon, Minnesota's governor has introduced several bills this morning aimed at fighting fraud within state programs. Governor Tim Walz announced his proposals during a press conference at the state capitol just about an hour ago. The Democrat says the legislation will help prevent, detect, investigate, and hold accountable anyone who commits fraud. Specifically, his proposals include using predictive analysis and machine learning and establishing a centralized office of Inspector General. It would also increase penalties for those who steal public funds by 20% and increase statutes of limitations for prosecuting fraud crimes.
Any dollar of state money, especially those being used for programs to enhance people's lives, if that goes to the wrong place, is misspent, or in the case of this, criminals are stealing it, we need to do everything possible to prosecute that.
And we'll have much more on Walz's proposals and reaction to them coming up tonight. They, of course, come months after allegations of billions of dollars worth of fraud in Minnesota's social service programs gained national attention and ultimately led to Walz dropping out of November's race for governor. As we reported yesterday, Vice President J.D. Vance announced a pause in federal Medicaid funding to Minnesota as those fraud investigations play out.